We often talk about racism in terms of overt acts or conscious biases, don't we? It's
Mhm.
usually about prejudice, discrimination, things we can sort of point to.
Right. The visible stuff.
Exactly. But what if its roots run far deeper, influencing our very ability to relate to others, maybe even ourselves?
Hmm.
What if it's a powerful unconscious defense mechanism, a way our minds try to protect us from something really uncomfortable, the reality of difference itself?
That's a really fundamental point.
So today we're taking a deep dive into a truly fascinating paper. It's titled Racism and Similarity, Paranoid-Schizoid Structures by Richard Tan.
And it's not just about political or social commentary, though it touches on that.
No, it's a psychoanalytic exploration,
Yeah.
really looking at how our minds grapple with difference at a very basic level, often, without us even realizing it.
Well, our mission today is to try and uncover some of those profound psychological dynamics, particularly how the mind uses these primitive defenses to deny difference. And this often leads to surprising, sometimes quite damaging consequences, especially within relationships, including, the very specific environment of therapy.
Right.
We'll explore why confronting these uncomfortable feelings isn't just ethically important, but really crucial for personal growth, for forging genuine connections, both with others and actually with ourselves too.
And to help you really grasp these complex ideas, we'll be looking at the paper's core arguments and some incredibly compelling clinical examples, stories that really bring these concepts to life.
Yeah, they really do.
You might find they make you rethink some of your own interactions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so with that idea of racism as a primitive defense, let's unpack the paper's core definition. It kicks off with a really provocative idea.
It does.
Racism in this context isn't just about hating another race. It's defined as an inability to accept and acknowledge difference without attempting to control and dominate the object that is felt to be different and separate.
So it's fundamentally a struggle with separateness itself. And what's fascinating is how it describes this control, this domination. It's an attempt to, and I'm quoting here, reinforce the fantasy that the quality of separateness does not exist.
Okay, fantasy with a fae. That's specific in psychoanalysis, isn't it?
Yes, very specific. It's not a conscious daydream. It's a deep, unconscious, often quite primitive mental scenario. It shapes our inner world, our emotional life.
So the mind is trying to preserve this unconscious belief that separateness, it just doesn't exist.
Pretty much. If something feels too different, too separate, the mind tries to make it similar, leading to what the paper calls a distorted, omnipotent feeling of similarity. It's an early, almost childlike way of coping with what feels like an overwhelming threat.
It really highlights how fundamental this denial of separateness is. It's not just about avoiding them, but about maintaining a fragile sense of self-control.
Sort of a protective mechanism.
Yes. If I can make you the same as me or control you into being similar, then I don't have to deal with the challenging reality of our differences.
Or the vulnerability that comes with acknowledging dependency on something separate.
Right.
Exactly. The paper connects this to infantile fantasies and a very primitive level of functioning known as the paranoid-schizoid position.
Okay, let's break that down a bit.
Think about an infant's earliest experiences. In this stage, usually in infancy, the mind is overwhelmed by powerful emotions. It tends to cope by splitting things, objects, feelings, into all good or all bad.
To manage intense anxiety.
Precisely. And difference in the state can feel like an unbearable threat, like the good breast of the mother disappearing, signaling impending loss or frustration.
Okay.
So, to survive this perceived threat, difference has to be denigrated, perhaps annihilated or made similar, in order to control the threat of painful acknowledgement of dependency needs. It's about maintaining omnipotent control.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. It makes me think about those times, when you meet someone new and your mind immediately tries to find common ground almost too quickly.
To smooth over the unfamiliarity.
Yeah, just to avoid that initial awkwardness. It feels like a milder version, but the impulse seems related, doesn't it?
It could be, yes.
So this raises a question for you, the listener. How often do we, maybe without even realizing it, try to diminish or erase differences in our daily interactions, maybe in friendships, family, even at work,
Simply to avoid discomfort or vulnerability.
instead of truly engaging with the otherness of the person? Something to think about.
Yes.
Now, if these deep unconscious dynamics are at play in everyday life, it gets even more intense in certain situations.
Like therapy.
Exactly. The paper emphasizes these dynamics play out intensely in psychotherapy,
Mm.
especially when the therapist and patient are from different racial or cultural backgrounds.
Right. That therapeutic relationship built on trust and vulnerability, it becomes a kind of crucible for these feelings. They get forced to the surface.
And the paper argues, doesn't it, that unless these deep-seated feelings are brought out and interpreted,
Hmm.
specifically in the transference,
Yes. Transference, those unconscious patterns, feelings redirected from the past onto the therapist. Unless that's addressed, the whole process just gets stuck.
you can't move forward.
No. And Dorothy Evans Holmes, an American psychoanalyst, she actually highlights common obstacles in these cross-cultural therapy pairs.
Like what?
Well, things like white therapist guilt, um, black therapist over-identifying with the patient's struggles, maybe,
Yeah.
and warded off aggression from both sides.
So crucial emotional stuff gets unconsciously avoided.
Exactly. And the paper notes sometimes if a patient explains a problem only in racial terms, the therapist might acknowledge that.
But miss the deeper layer.
Precisely. They might fail to expand the patient's understanding of the underlying intrapsychic conflicts. They might mistake the racial explanation for the whole story when it could be, a manifestation of these primitive defenses against difference itself.
Leaving the patient stuck.
Yeah. And it's clearly not easy for therapists either. The paper talks about the huge pressure of confronting racist material from patients. It says it's not a luxury afforded to the therapist when everything is felt to be immediate and concrete.
It sounds incredibly challenging. Requires real skill and resilience.
Absolutely. And the paper gives a stark example. Patients sometimes rejecting therapists out of hand simply because they're foreign or not white.
Claiming they won't be understood.
Right. Claiming a therapist from another culture might not be able to understand the patient's feelings. But the paper argues this isn't always genuine concern.
It could be the defense itself.
Often, yes. An inappropriate attitude to differences, allowing patients to cling to those primitive defenses instead of engaging with the anxiety of encountering someone truly different. The discomfort is just too much.
It really makes you reflect. Think about any relationship where a difficult truth or difference needs acknowledging. How often do our own biases, or maybe even our fear of seeming biased, how often does that stop us from truly getting to the core issue? It can feel like walking on eggshells.
Avoiding the very thing that needs light shown on it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, talking about this in theory is one thing.
Yeah.
But the paper really brings it home with these clinical examples.
They're very powerful illustrations.
Let's start with patient A. A white community worker saw himself as racially aware, open-minded, worked with Asian and Black clients, seemed to be doing all the right things.
Right. And he specifically chose a foreign non-white therapist. Initially, he sort of used this choice to validate his own self-image.
How so?
Well, he could project his own unwanted parts onto others, like his clients perhaps, while seeing himself and the therapist as similarly doing something positive and constructive.
Creating an ideal space for his projections.
Exactly. Maintaining this fantasy of similarity, this shared virtue, which helped him avoid the challenge of any actual difference between them.
But this ideal similarity became a barrier. He felt stuck.
Yes, both in his work and therapy.
So what broke through that illusion, that fantasy?
Well, the breakthrough came when the therapist recognized something interesting. The patient's complaints about his clients. They started mirroring the therapist's own feelings in the sessions, what we call countertransference.
The therapist's emotional reaction to the patient.
Yes. The therapist was feeling frustrated, useless, just like the patient complained his clients made him feel.
Okay.
So the therapist interpreted the patient's boasting and frustration as a kind of hostile attack to disarm me from doing him any good, a way to maintain superiority because the therapist, like his clients, wasn't white.
A defense against feeling helped by someone different.
Exactly. And a key turning point came when the therapist used the word obsequious, meaning overly eager to please. The patient didn't understand the word.
Just one word.
Just one word. But this simple linguistic difference triggered intense shame, anger, paranoid fantasies. He felt attacked by foreign words.
Wow.
It forced him, really, to confront the actual undeniable difference between us, which he could not face before. The illusion shattered.
And here's the real kicker, isn't it? The part that just drives it home.
The girlfriend.
Yes. After all this intense work, patient A reveals his girlfriend, the very reason he sought therapy, was from Southeast Asia.
An omission, as the paper puts it, something he hadn't thought important to mention earlier.
That's just A stunning illustration of the unconscious at work. The cost of maintaining that fantasy of similarity meant hiding a crucial part of his life.
It really shows how deeply these defenses can operate, shaping choices, relationships, blinding us even from ourselves.
It makes you ask yourself, doesn't it? How do we, in our own lives, maybe seek out or avoid people based on unconscious needs, only for those dynamics to surface later in challenging ways?
With parts of our story hidden, even from us.
Okay, let's move to patient B. Another fascinating case. A white European social worker.
And her main complaint initially was that she couldn't understand her non-white therapist's accent.
Despite having a heavy accent herself.
Exactly. Which immediately makes you wonder, why couldn't she perceive her own accent but was so focused on the therapist's?
She proudly spoke of treating non-white clients equally, having black friends. She even felt vaguely rather special and proud being seen with a black man.
Portraying herself as a liberated and intelligent white woman.
Right. This carefully constructed self-image, this fantasy of being above prejudice, was clearly very important.
So her self-perception of being equal or liberated, that was actually a defense.
Absolutely. A way to manage deeper, perhaps more uncomfortable feelings.
About herself and others.
Yes. In the transference, it emerged she secretly felt quite superior, rather patronizing, and acknowledging difference, specifically the therapist's better command of English, which was objectively true, was incredibly painful for her.
Why was that so painful?
It challenged her fantasy that her European background automatically gave her a closer affinity to English than someone non-European.
It disrupted her sense of hierarchy.
Exactly. And confronting this forced her into what the paper calls a painful taking back of the disowned and devalued parts of herself.
So she had to own those feelings. Yes. She finally admitted her racist feelings and began to see herself differently as a foreign person rather than the pseudo-English person she'd imagined herself to be.
It shows how even well-intentioned self-perceptions can be defenses, creating blind spots.
Definitely. It makes you think, where might our own self-images, even good ones, inadvertently stop us from fully engaging with others, or even our own true identity?
And finally, patient C, and your Asian man. He shows yet another variation of these defenses.
Yeah, this patient exhibited what are called negative narcissistic traits. He would swing wildly between omnipotent fantasies.
Like what?
Like being totally white,
Right.
identifying with Pavarotti, or totally black, like the footballer John Barnes. Huge swings.
Yeah.
And in these states, he could either identify with a westernized part of the therapist to feel superior, or identify with the foreign me to sort of wallow in shared inferiority.
So both states, idealized or devalued, serve the same purpose.
Pretty much. To control the therapist and prevent any real progress based on the uncomfortable reality of difference. He couldn't integrate these parts of himself, so he projected them.
And his dreams were revealing too.
Very stark. He dreamed of boat people, gooks, and war dreams, explicitly linking the therapist to these devalued foreign images.
Wow.
And he'd project frustrations onto useless, lazy, black immigrants when the trains were late. Couldn't see any white workers in that mood. It was a very clear externalization.
So his internal struggle between his Asian and white parts, which is constantly being pushed outward onto others, including the therapist.
Exactly. He denigrated his Asian culture as inferior, undesirable, trapping himself between these foreign bad bits and white good bits. He couldn't integrate them.
So how did he progress?
Well, interpreting these racist feelings towards the therapist, not just as literal hatred, but as reflections of his own devalued Asian self,
Yeah.
that was key.
Seeing the projection for what it was.
Yes. It eventually allowed him to recover some Asian parts of himself and gradually make progress. It's a powerful reminder of how internal conflicts, especially around identity, can lead us to project good or bad onto groups or individuals,
Creating this self-perpetuating cycle of internal and external struggle.
keeping us from a more integrated, authentic self.
Now, our deep dive also shows these dynamics aren't just in one-on-one therapy. The paper describes a really fascinating group supervision session.
Right, where the author, a foreign, non-white supervisor, saw these patterns playing out in a group of therapists.
What happened?
Okay, so a student presented a patient. This patient's husband, who was foreign and non-white, was moving them both to his country. And the group, including the supervisor initially, just got completely swept up in anxiety. They started projecting racist overtones directed at the husband and his culture.
Really? Therapists?
Yes, focusing almost entirely on rescuing the patient from this authoritarian and persecutory foreign land. They were completely immersed in this narrative.
So the whole group was focusing on the husband's culture to avoid something else, something closer to home.
Precisely. The paper calls it a parallel process. The group was unconsciously projecting its own persecutory anxiety
Anxiety about what?
about the new foreign, non-white supervisor and his emphasis on transference, an approach they found challenging, maybe threatening.
Hmm.
They felt his approach was persecutory and de-skilling to them. So by pushing this discomfort onto the patient's husband, they avoided confronting the obvious difference between themselves and the supervisor and the discomfort his new approach created for them.
A subtle, unconscious deflection onto an external villain.
Exactly.
So how did the supervisor handle that? How did he break that spell, as the paper calls it?
Well, he noted that acknowledging this difference was crucial. He gently brought the group's attention to the possibility they were projecting their feelings about his foreignness and his challenging ideas onto the foreign husband.
Pointing out the parallel.
Yes, acknowledging the actual difference between them and the supervisor and how it was showing up in their anxieties about the case that allowed them to break free from the projection.
It shifted the focus back to the room.
Exactly. It helped them address their own internal processes, their own discomforts, rather than externalizing them. It shows how easily groups can find external villains or victims to avoid their own discomfort with difference or change.
That's incredibly insightful. So bring this all together.
This deep dive, it really shows how the paper presents, I think, 3 core points. First, unconscious racist feelings. They're undeniably present, especially when backgrounds differ, even in people who think they're open-minded. Second, racism, in this view, acts as a primitive, almost infantile defense against personal growth, a way to avoid the anxiety of difference.
Right.
And third, interpreting these feelings within the transference dynamic, particularly in therapy, is absolutely imperative for genuine progress, because that's where these defenses really become visible.
So the big message here is that racism, through this psychoanalytic lens, is an unconscious mechanism to dodge the discomfort of difference, often stemming from very early, painful developmental experiences.
It's a profound insight into our internal world. Suggests this struggle with difference is a fundamental human challenge.
And the paper concludes, doesn't it, that even people who claim not to have racist feelings often experience uncertainty and ambivalence about another of a different race.
Yeah, a subtle internal struggle that's often denied.
And achieving even a minimal degree of tolerance of the depressive position, that's the more mature acceptance of reality, integrating good and bad, tolerating ambivalence, loss, separateness.
That's a significant developmental milestone. It's not about erasing difference, but learning to tolerate and ultimately perhaps value it.
This has really challenged the everyday understanding of racism, hasn't it? Taking us deep into the unconscious mind.
It's a powerful framework, not just for societal issues, but for our own internal worlds. And it leaves you with the provocative thought, doesn't it? If our unconscious mind works so powerfully to either, destroy difference or create this distorted, omnipotent feeling of similarity just to shield us from discomfort. What profound opportunities are we missing? Opportunities for genuine connection, for self-knowledge, for more integrated sense of self.
Right.
What parts of ourselves and others do we unwittingly keep at arm's length by avoiding that difficult but ultimately enriching work of truly seeing, accepting, and engaging with difference in all its forms?
That's a powerful question to leave with. The next time you find yourself reacting strongly to someone profoundly other, or maybe just glossing over differences, consider what internal processes might be stirring and the immense potential for growth that lies in accepting that uncomfortable recognition of difference and really allowing yourself to engage with it.
It's a path to deeper self-awareness and connection.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.